My name is Havelyn Chiasson, and I was a member of the North Shore Regiment. I was born the 14th of May, 1921. I was born on Misco Island, up in the northern part of New Brunswick. We were so poor, we didn't have a quarter, we didn't have 10 cents, and the parents didn't have any money. So I joined when I was 18. We had a few months here, and then we were landed in England. We sailed out of Halifax. Never been to Halifax before, but we sailed out of here. Well, everybody was joining. It was a job. We were getting $1.25 a day. That's what we got, and so that was big money. Big money for young people. Big money for anybody. Yeah. That was the thing. Everybody was doing it, so you just did it. Yeah. I joined up in Bathurst, and a lot of us, of course, we were born on the sea, as we say, and we wanted to join the Navy, some of us, but they weren't recruiting for the Navy then. It was a year after before they started fully recruiting for the Navy. Well, when we got in the harbor, our colonel said, we're staying on the ship tonight. And the captain come aboard. He said, you're not staying on this ship. Get these men off there. That's the way he talked. Get these men off. And the colonel said, well, there's no trains available. I don't care about trains. Get them off the ship. And so we got off the ship and went out in the hills in Dartmouth. Because there were ships on their side in the harbor. There were 4 or 5 ships that had been sunk the night before. So anyway, they finally, around 10 o'clock that night, they got a train pulled in. We got on the train, and then the Germans, when we got as far as York, the Germans had bombed the tracks ahead of us. So we had to pull into York for a while, and then we left there by way of London and landed in Aldershot the next morning. That was the start of our stay in England. We knew we're involved in a war area. We knew that right then, yeah. You'd probably be nervous and scared most of your life from that on. Well, we were in Aldershot for probably for 3 or 4 months, maybe, about 5 months. And we moved to Horsham, I think it was, and we joined the regiment there. And then we started training for D-Day. They never called it D-Day, they called it, we're training for the second front. Nobody knew where the second front was going to be, but that's what we were training for. Cove was a wireless school, and I went there for, I guess it was 6 weeks, then I come back to the regiment. With every regiment had sent someone. So they come back, and then we started training from what knowledge we had, and that was the start of our training. And of course, all day, you weren't on wireless all the time. You were training for D-Day, training for boarding ship landing, boarding ship landing, night and day. That's what you did. So we went into Portsmouth and went about 20 miles and pulled in. They started pulling in the woods. So we pulled in the woods there. But when we got in the woods, here was a lot of tents, all set up tents. So we got out of our trucks and into the tents. And then we had called into the dining room. They had a big dining room there. And the colonel told us that this is the second front. The camp was sealed off. They called an army rule. They closed all the barbed wire all around. They sealed the gates. Nobody was allowed in, nobody allowed out. So then the next night, we boarded our ships. And when we got aboard the ship, you probably read the history, there was a big storm on. So we stayed aboard ship all night, and the next night too, because we stayed 2 nights. Third, I think we were supposed to land the 3rd, and the 4th, and the 5th, and two nights, and then Eisenhower announced they had to go because the tide in France, was going to be different, and that's the only day they could land on the 6th. If they waited beyond the 6th, they'd have to postpone. So anyway, then they told us this is D-Day. So we took off that night. It's 6 hours from Southampton to Normandy. We went across in our big ships, and then we got down into our landing crafts. 35 men to a landing craft. We were in the dining room, and they allocated the beaches, the North Shore, Saint-Aubin, the Queen Zone and Chaudières on the right, the British on the left, the Americans on the far right. That's where we're landing. There's your beaches. That's your beach. These landing crafts were all manned by trained British sailors, and then there was 3,500 landing crafts. They were trying to hit the beaches all at the same time. So the operators would circle around. All of a sudden, one of the crafts would hit a mine. They would be all lost. Another one not far from a craft we were in, hit a reef. There was a reef there, see. And of course, some of them were able to swim shore, it wasn't very far, and some were drowned. And then the machine guns were coming from all angles. I don't know. We lost 100 men that first day. Out of 826, we lost 100. Here would a fellow you've been with for 5 to 6 years, and he'd holler at you, help me have, but you couldn't stop. You had to go on. And I often used to wonder, somebody said, what would they think of you? He knew that you couldn't stop. But he'd holler anyway. And then we hit the beaches, and we captured North Shore captured a mile of beach and a half a mile deep the first night, yeah. Yeah, when the first Frenchman we met, he said, Mon Dieu, Canadiens soldats, ils parlent français. They couldn't get over it. There was Canadian soldiers here, and they speak French. Yeah, and that's them. Well, the first night was awful because we dug, it was all sand, we dug slit trenches. I only went down, but I was tired out. I said, I don't, some of us used to say, we don't believe that story. And so I dug down 3 feet. I said, you don't have to go down 4.5 feet. And the Germans bombed us that night. And they strafed all night, bombed and strafed. And boy, the ground was just shaking. So I could see, you've got to be down 4 feet, all right. Yeah, you learn your lesson after the first few nights. So we consolidated and stayed there, and the next day we fought on towards Colin and so on. And that battle kept on going. They won it at Carpiquet airport so they could bring their own planes in. So they asked the North Shore Regiment to capture that. So that's where we fought for I don't know how many days. And that's where I won that medal. And anyway, we captured the airport, and then they cleaned it all up and got all the German planes and stuff. And then the Air Force took it over. Yeah, it was a hard battle, and it was right on a hill, and they had machine guns all over the place. So we had quite a battle there. The machine gunners, they were fighters. The wireless operators, they were fighting. You did both, but I would be in an area like this. We'd come in and consolidate, and for maybe 20 minutes or half an hour, and the colonel would have some messages to go to your company, that company, or that company. He would want to know how you're making out up there, how you're making out down there. So those messages would go through to those different officers. And And then away you go again for another, you know. Yeah, yeah. And then went in the big drive across France. I was in a carrier, and I had a different, not a carry-on wireless. We had one mounted like that, right? And I operated right from there. Yeah. There'd be 2 wireless operators in D company, 2 wireless operators in C company, and 2 wireless companies in A company. And the control set, if I was on the control set, I would be in touch with those all day long, all day long. Sometimes you'd travel alone, sometimes somebody'd go with you, yeah. Yeah. If you could go with a Jeep part way, maybe one of the Jeep drivers would drive you part way, and you'd carry it the rest of the way. It could be too dangerous for the driver to go any further. Every night, you'd consolidate, the reinforcements come in. I used to go to see if there's any wireless operators, because we were always short of wireless operators. And the fellow said to me, there's a fellow here from Mesquite. And I said, you can't. No, there is. And so I went over, and here was Milton Barbert, and we went to school together. So we were kidding, and he said, I just landed here last night, and they sent me up here to the North Shore. I said, that's great. So somebody had already picked him up. He was a fighter. And anyway, the next night when I went down, we used to, when you went down to be echelon, there would be 10 or 15 bodies wrapped in blankets. So I used to go over and just take the blanket off their face. You know the way they folded a blanket, just up. I left it up. Here was Milton. He was killed during the night. So he's only in there for about 5 hours. He was killed. And he's buried in Grosse Beach. So that's the way it ended. And there was always, and you never know, you know. Funny thing about life, you know, you'd be standing there, and around a carrier, we just stopped for a break or something. You'd move over here, and I'd move over there, you'd be killed, you know? And if I'd stayed there, I'd be killed. So it makes you wonder about those things. Why? You know, why it happens that way? You know? And the same way, like going in D-Day, somebody would be firing from up there with a sniper, but he'd aim at you or me. Or he picked one. He only could take one. So you wonder why. You just can't figure it out. War is so crazy. Yeah. So I was down in the trench there. Somebody hollered me and said, Keogh, his name was Keogh, Jack Keogh. They said, cover Jack's face up, you know, the blanket. So I went over to cover his face up. He'd been laying there all night. His face was warm. So I said to some of the boys, get this man out of here. He's not dead. And they took him out, lifted him out, brought him out. He came to. When I used to see Jack after that, he said, you shouldn't have touched my face. Yeah, he must have been under shock all night, see? Well, the colonel came in at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning in my slit trends, and he had this piece of, send this message out. I looked at it. It said, cease fire. Don't fire unless you're fired on by the enemy. So out went the message. That was the end of the war on our front. That was that was May the 5th. The war ended in Holland, Germany. The war ended May the 8th officially, but on a lot of different fronts, May the 3rd. Yeah. I was lucky in lots of ways because I was in hospital for 3 months, so I was okay that way. But some people that were, the next day they had to find a job. They had no place to stay, they had no money, and they were single, and so It must have been hard. I guess you learn a lot, but one thing that I can see, that wars don't solve the problem, even today. We used to wonder why back in those days, but you wonder why today.